Hi, I'm that Astro chap and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be putting two different processes in PixInsight head to head to see which one is better. So the two that I'm going to be using are StarNet or StarNet2 and the Russell Croman rcastro plugin, which is StarXTerminator. So both of them offer roughly the same functionality, but they go about it in slightly different ways. So they both give you the ability to remove stars from an existing image, and you can either retain those stars and screen them back in or add them back into your image later on after you've done any processing independently, or you can completely remove them and just discard the image altogether. So for the purposes of this test, I'm going to be using two different images, one of a galaxy and one of a nebula, and running both processes on each of those images and comparing the results. In terms of assessing them, I'm going to be looking at four key criteria. So the first is the quality of the resulting images after running the process. The second is the speed in which they run. The third is the ease of use. And then the fourth is the price. So with that, let's jump into PixInsight and get started. Okay, so here's the first image that I want to work with, which is the Whirlpool galaxy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up the two different processes. So I've already installed them. So there's StarNet2, which is the latest iteration of the StarNet offering, and then I've also got StarXTerminator, which I haven't purchased yet. I've just got the trial license, which gives me 30 days to play around with it and see if I like it before I commit. And this is a big part of the reason why I'm making this video. I am actually considering switching across to using StarNet because I've been using some of the other rcastro plugins for a while with great success, and I'm very happy with them and thought this might be a good alternative to StarNet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these images up and duplicate them and just update their identifiers so that we can keep track of which one is which. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to append the name of the process that we're using for each of them. So I'll have one for StarNet2 and then another one for StarXTerminator. And then I'm just going to move this one out of the way for the time being and collapse this because we can come back to the StarNet one in a second. So for StarXTerminator, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the generate star map or star image, and I'm also going to use unscreened stars, which is basically, if you read through this, it tells you that if you plan to merge the stars back in, then using unscreened stars can help later on with the quality of the screen that you apply like via Pixel Math later. And they actually even give you the formula for screening the stars back in. So I'm going to do that because I think at the end of splitting them, I'll apply like a small transformation, like a curves transformation, and then remerge them and see what the resulting images look like in both cases. So that ran very quickly. In fact, a lot faster than I expected, but there's not too many stars in this image, so I guess it's not crazy. And initial inspection, it looks pretty good. There's a couple of the bigger stars that have been left behind. But yeah, let's see, there's a couple of things there, but not much. It's actually done a really thorough job of removing everything, and there's not many artifacts left in there. So if we zoom in on the stars, there's maybe like a tiny little bit of a blue galaxy detail in there, but really it's done a pretty impressive job in a very short space of time. So I'll collapse these up, move these across, and we can do the same exercise now with the StarNet2. So let's open this image and expand the process. And I'm going to try and replicate as close as I can the same settings. So I'll create the star mask here, so the same as create the stars, generate the star image. This is already a stretched image, so I don't need it as linear data. I'm not going to upsample, and I'm just going to run it. Okay, so this is already noticeably slower compared with StarXTerminator. Quite drastically so. So what I'm going to do at the end of the video is I'll check how long each of these processes took and put together a little summary table, and we can go over that at the end. Okay, so it has completed, and again, it actually looks pretty good. One thing that jumps out immediately is there are some artifacts left over. So it's kind of a bit blotchy and a bit patchy where I guess some of the bigger stars have had some artifacts left behind that StarXTerminator managed to handle more effectively than StarNet could. So let me rearrange everything. So we've got the StarNet stuff on the left hand side, and we'll have StarXTerminator on the right, and we can do a side-by-side comparison. Yeah, so when you see it next to each other, you can see like the difference in terms of the galaxy image that's left. These artifacts, they just don't exist in the right hand image, and there's a fair few of them. The big stars are still present, but yeah. So they're coming from the brighter stars by the looks of it. And it's just not able to handle those quite as well. Whereas if we compare it with StarXTerminator, the bright ones are obviously the ones that are left over again, but it's done a better job, I think, of just tidying everything up and keeping it completely split. So let's do a little test. So let's apply a small transformation. So we'll do a curves transformation, and I'm going to apply the same thing to both. I'm just going to bring this down and take this up, and then I'll bump the saturation a little bit. Just something small so that we've got so we can test that after we've applied an update, then the stars being merged back in look okay. So I'm going to apply the same thing to both. There we go. Okay, that looks good. And then I will just reset this actually, and then just close it. And now what I think I'm going to do... Yeah, so I guess with StarXTerminator, because you don't have those extra artifacts, if you're changing like the brightness or anything else, or you're boosting saturation, any of those artifacts you would be boosting as well unless you mask them out. So it depends what you're trying to achieve. Maybe that's desirable in some cases, probably not in this so much. But there. So what I'll do now is I'm going to merge back in the stars, and StarXTerminator actually gives you the formula, like I mentioned earlier, for how to actually go about screening them back in. Annoyingly, you can't copy it, and there's no help menu that I can see. So I'll just have to memorize it, but it looks like it's pretty much the formula I've been using in the past anyway. So I'm going to bring up the under processes pixel math, and what I'm going to do is just populate this with the equivalent formula that's shown in StarXTerminator. That looks good, and then I'm just going to run that. So that's the StarNet one. That looks pretty decent. And then for StarXTerminator, I'm just going to copy this again just to save some time. And paste that in here. And then I will run this. Okay, so now we can compare these two images and see what they look like. So there's not much difference. What I would say is, and I don't know if it comes out in the video, there is a subtle haze that appears on the StarNet2 image that you don't really have with the StarXTerminator one. It's very, very subtle, but it's slightly hazy. It's like it's lost some clarity. So if I put them side by side, even now I'm not sure it really comes out that well, but it does look ever so slightly blurry on the left versus the right. It's minor, but it is noticeable. And looking at the stars, like there's not too much difference actually in the result of how they've been merged back in, even for the big ones or the little ones. Yeah, it's pretty consistent actually. So there's not a huge amount to say on this beyond that haze, I don't think. So I think the best thing to do is to jump to another image. So what I'm going to do now is perform the same test on the Horsehead Nebula and see how we get on with that instead. So this has a lot more stars in it. It's got some very big ones. It's got some star halos to contend with. So this is going to be probably a little bit more interesting of a test. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this again, and I'm going to update the names of the tabs exactly the same way I did before. So I've got one for StarNet and one for StarXTerminator, and then I'm going to go through the exact same sequence. So I'm going to run this the processes on each of them, and I'm going to keep the settings as I had them before. So let's bring up StarXTerminator as well. And I'm just going to move StarXTerminator over here because I'll do that one second. So let's start with StarNet2. I'm going to create the star mask and just run it. As expected, this is even slower than last time. There's a lot more stars to process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward the video and then I'll summarize the time at the end. And this is nearly complete. And we're done. So there are some artifacts in there immediately that we can see, but we'll come back to this. Actually, those big stars still remain, as expected, I suppose. It would be hard to pluck them out. There are quite a few little artifacts in and around it, though. Yeah. So let's collapse these anyway. And then what we can do is we can go and have a look at running StarXTerminator on the same image and see how that performs. And I'm just going to keep these settings as I had them before for consistency. Oh well, that's a lot faster. Okay, so I didn't even need to fast forward the video for that one. Significantly quicker to run. There are similar looking artifacts coming out in the stars, but that image actually looks a lot cleaner again. In fact, quite a lot cleaner than the StarNet equivalent. So if I put these side by side, and we can do the side by side comparison again, and I'll just close these out so they're out of the way. Yeah. So what I'm noticing is there's, and I'm trying to move these around so that you can see both. There are a number of like blotches where stars have been dropped that exist in the StarNet image that do not exist in the StarXTerminator equivalent. So all around the outsides, you can kind of see almost like watermarks, like little droplets that have dried. There is kind of the whole of the StarNet image is kind of peppered with them, whereas StarXTerminator, you just don't see any of these, especially around this kind of right-hand edge of the nebula and in and around there. It really hasn't done as good of a job compared with StarXTerminator, which is completely devoid of any indication there were stars there. So the ones where it's left them, like the big stars, they're pretty clean and crisp, and anything that's small has been eradicated in its entirety. So with that, let's run the same kind of curves transformation test. So make a small adjustment, screen back in the stars, and then compare one more time. So I'm just going to do a very simple thing like I did last time, just adjust the brightness and the saturation ever so slightly. And I'm going to apply the same update to both. And then what I will do is use pixel math again and just merge the images back together. So that's one done. And then I'm just going to do the same for StarNet2 and merge those images back together as well. Okay, and here we go. So, again, there's kind of this slight haze. It's very subtle on the StarNet image, ever so slightly like blurry. It is really, really subtle though. Other than that, the way they've merged back in is pretty similar. Like, there's nothing too obvious. Let's just have a look at some of the other stars and just see. Oh, actually, okay, so here's an example. So this star in StarXTerminator is actually still really crisp in the center, whereas on StarNet, it's blurred out the definition around the outside of it. So that is one noticeable thing. I wonder whether you'd find that with other stars as well. So there are some subtle differences. They are relatively minor, but nonetheless noticeable. So with that, let's do a quick recap and comparison of the two different processes and compare them against the key criteria that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So quality I've omitted from this table that I put together because we've already gone through it in a lot of detail up to this point, but I would say that StarXTerminator wins out in that regard. It's leaving less artifacts behind, and I think the resulting image well, after the split is better, but also if you screen the stars back in, I think it wins out there as well. Not to say that StarNet doesn't do a good job, like it's still very effective at what it does, just not quite as good as StarXTerminator in my personal opinion. So in terms of the next criteria, so this table, what I've done is I've broken it down so you've got a column for each of the different processes, and then on the left hand side you've got the summary of what we're looking at. So for speed, we've got two comparisons. We've got the Whirlpool Galaxy, which we did first, and then we've got the Horsehead Nebula, which we did second. In the case of StarXTerminator, both of them came in sort of very similar times, actually, 7 and 10 seconds. And then for StarNet, 32 and 104 seconds conversely. So, I mean, StarNet is taking 4-5 times as long as the Whirlpool Galaxy was processed in StarXTerminator, and for Horsehead Nebula, it's taking over 10 times as long versus StarXTerminator. So I think it's a very clear-cut win for StarXTerminator in this scenario. The other thing worth pointing out related to the speed of execution is I'm running on an Apple M1 Mac, so obviously these results will vary depending on the image, it will vary depending on the hardware you're running on and what else you've got running in terms of processes on your computer at the time. So moving down the list, so ease of use, both of them are very easy to use. There's really not much by way of configuration that you need to worry about, and the application of them is very straightforward. StarXTerminator does give you the tips on how to screen back in the stars afterwards and the pixel math formula, which is a nice touch. But overall, I think they tie on this, so I've marked them both as easy. Then next on the list is price. StarXTerminator is just shy of $60. And I put an asterisk next to that because if you have one of the rcastro plugins already, then you get about a $10 discount on top of that, which brings it down to somewhere in the order of $50, which is pretty good. By contrast, StarNet is completely free, so StarNet for sure wins on this round. So then in summary, quality, StarXTerminator wins, less blemishes, less artifacts left over, generally better results in my opinion. Speed, similar situation, StarXTerminator is significantly faster, at least on my setup. Ease of use, there's a tie, so we can rule that one out. And then finally, price, StarNet wins. So it's 2-1 to StarXTerminator if we ignore ease of use, or 3-2 if we include it. So with that, I think I am going to be using StarXTerminator going forwards, and I will upgrade my trial once it expires. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this if you've enjoyed the video, or you've used either or both of these processes. Do drop a comment and let me know which you think is better. And if you've used anything else, also drop a comment because I'd be really keen to hear if there are other options out there that I'm not aware of. And if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help the channel and I really do appreciate it. Thanks again for watching and see you next time.